Hello, and how are you doing today? Last time we talked, if you happen to go there, I asked you to look at death, consider your relationship and your discomfort with death. And I'm pretty sure as soon as anybody hears the word death, they go automatically to losing somebody they love or their own death. But it's not always what's being talked about. Death isn't always about the body, even though it is a reflection of what will happen to the body. I study a philosophy, I follow the philosophy of yoga, Vedanta, that doesn't look at death as an ending. Death isn't really an existing thing, it's death of the physical form, but who we truly are when we get to know ourselves never dies. We are energy sources, and that energy comes from a source, goes back to the source. And then everything of nature works to reform a shape that we can inhabit again and again until we've learned everything that we're meant to in this life, in each lifetime that we inhabit. But either way, death occurs to within everything physical. Death visits every thing that is nature, every plant. They die sooner down here because they don't like the light here. But it's every tree, every flower, every season dies, every breath has an ending. Every way of being that we have has an ending. Our states of being, our ages, teenager, at young adult, older adult, postmenopausal women, we have all these stages that we go through that die off. We have ideas that we formed at certain stages in our life that eventually die off once we learn more information about being. So I'm curious how your work with death went, what it was like to look at death, and where you think you really need to find a way to be okay with the discomfort of death. And it doesn't have to be anything big right now. Maybe you start with the small, the easy, the thing that needs to be done. Maybe you've been in a job far too long that hasn't served you, that is not feeding your true nature. You've learned everything from it that you can, and the only reason you're there is for safety. Well, safety keeps us in a state of comfort that's not really healthy. Safety isn't really the comfort that we think it is, because it holds us back. It keeps us locked into not maybe acting how we want to, or speaking how we want to, or living how we want to. It keeps you trapped in a cycle of scheduling that doesn't work for who you truly are. Maybe that's the death that needs to occur, and it takes a lot. So go back to your list if you made it. And if you haven't, you can go back and listen to the previous video about death and look at that one thing. Don't spread your focus too far. Look at the one thing and question what it really is that you're uncomfortable with. Where is the discomfort? Start to look at all the things that create the discomfort for you. Why is the thought of leaving that job that might be making you ill, might be making you miserable, why is it so uncomfortable to think about leaving? What is it that's holding on? Is it because you don't know who you would be without it? Is it that you are unsure what would happen if you were to let go? Maybe you don't feel safe financially. Maybe there's other people counting on you or judging you for what you would or who you would be without that job. Take a look at it, dig down, don't stop, just keep going. Don't get distracted. Put some music on in the background and really work through it. What is it that is so uncomfortable? And when you've come up with that list, look at the easiest thing on there to deal with and say, okay, there's a step I can take. I'm going to face that one piece, just the one piece, not give up the whole job right away. I'll face that one piece and really dig into it, query it, and see if there's truth or if that's just a story that you've come up with. I remember a job I had once. I had just gotten so good at defining myself by it. It was in a mental institution, and I was really good at what I did. And it paid really well for the time of life that it was. I was in my 20s. The amount of money I was making then was good for that time, that decade. I had worked there previously for a few years, gone off backpacking, felt incredibly free because I'd left the job. I'd left all of that. I'd been gone over a year, and they called me when they found out I was back and really pushed to get me to come back. They needed people who knew what they were doing. And it was really hard money to turn down. So I went back despite knowing how unhealthy I had been in that job, how much it affected me. Poor sleep because you're working overnight sometimes, just constant alert so that you don't get killed by somebody. All these things. It was just not a healthy thing to do. But I had been traveling for a year. I needed a job, I needed money, and it was really hard to turn down. So I went back and I spent another 3 years there. Again, in a wholly unhealthy environment, which was actually worse because there were people there who living there who really would like to do damage to others if given an opportunity. And everything about it was just making me ill. But the institution was also on its way to being wound down, closed out. And because it was a government job and a union job, what part of it came to was, well, as they wind down, they're looking at placing everyone, just out of a job because you're union, because you're part of the government employees. They will help put you in a position of equal pay. So it doesn't matter if you have any real knowledge of this other job, it would be somewhere within the government that was of an equal level pay. So one of my options was the sheriff's department. Another was the youth prison, women's prison. And I sat with it and I looked around, and it was my most clear because I thought I'd been clear when I left the first time. And here I got incredibly clear. I started really watching everybody and seeing how incredibly unhealthy everyone was getting and how much they've been co-opted into the need for that paycheck, for that money, for that level of living. And I saw how unhealthy they were, how poorly they ate, how their lack of sleep affected them, how it affected their relationships, how it affected how much they would drink on their days off. And I just couldn't do it. I could not do it. I'd been brought up to think of having a job as a secure thing, that you should work for a pension. That was one hand. And my father, the same man who taught that, on the other hand, when I ended up in a job one time where I felt incredibly sick, they created chemicals and it was always in the air. And I remember I would go to work every day and puke. And I called home, not sure what to do. I was quite young. And my father said, quit. The same man who taught me that you get a job to hold on to and stay, and you show up and you get your pension. He's like, I said, I don't get it. I can't quit. That's wrong. You taught me it's wrong. And he said, I don't care. You've got to go in and quit. I'm driving there now. I'll be there in 10 minutes and you better be ready to go. Quit. And I thought I was feeling ill before that. I felt so sick at that moment, going in to tell this office manager that I was quitting right then and there and I was leaving, and she was furious. And I tried to explain to her how sick I'd been and how sick I was every time I walked in. That didn't matter to her. Like, okay, well, I grabbed my stuff. I did the thing. I quit. My father picked me up, drove me to a local pub near their home, brought me in. It was winter and we had nachos and hot toddies. And he looked at me and said, you feel better? I went, I do. I feel far better. I didn't feel sick anymore. My head was cleared and I was so happy I was out of there. So I learned that the discomfort of going against what I thought should happen was nothing compared to the discomfort, the horrible safety of staying in that job to follow through with everybody else's story of what should happen. So that lesson I took and I extrapolated into this job at the mental institution. I'm sure there's better words for it now, but that's what we called it. And as everything was winding down and they were pushing me to choose one of the positions, sheriff's department, I just thought, nope, no, I can't do this. I will be trapped and I will make myself sick because it gets too comfortable having that paycheck. And that comfort of that paycheck, of knowing how much vacation time I would have, of knowing how much money I'd have in the bank, that really, when I looked at it, paled in comparison to the pain of staying, the pain of not being who I needed to be, of not living, of not being something else. So I said no. I was told I was crazy. I said, sure. And off I went. And it was uncomfortable at first to let that go a second time, but I was okay. There was a universe looking out for me. And I literally got picked up for something else quite quickly. You can hold on to what you think is safe, or you can let that piece die off, have its time, have its ending, and then open up space to move on to the next. So I ask again, what is something that needs to die? The more you practice this, the closer you get to that place of really being okay with death on all levels, of not trying to grip everything so tight and hold on so tight that you go against the true nature of not only yourself, but everything that surrounds you. If you never let things die off, there's no room for anything new to grow. So put it into practice. I will be working with a small handful of people. If this sounds like you, if you are done with discomfort, get in touch. I'll see if you're somebody that would work well within the framework of what I will be sharing, and we'll go from there. But it doesn't stop you from starting this. Try it out. See where you get stuck. And when you get stuck, I'll be here and we can start working together. Take care.